Hello, welcome to the second installment of Sewing Basics. It's been a while, and with the things that have been going on, we've been a little distracted, but I think we're back ready to get to it. The title of this one is The Most Important Tool in Your Sewing Room, Your Iron. And every time I say that, when I start teaching classes, I get lots of funny looks around the room because they obviously think the sewing machine is the most important piece. But your iron can make everything look more professional, more well done, and is important. I have my iron up every day as I'm sewing because it can make such a difference in how professional and finished your garments look. So let's start with choosing an iron. This is one that I just had to get new because I wore my old one out. And this is an average iron. You don't have to get the most expensive one or don't get the cheapest one. But there's a few things you want to look for. You want to make sure it's got a stainless steel bottom, not a Teflon or other kind of bottom that is coated. And you want good choices on your types of fabric that you can use. You want the steam capability of the right fabrics and a steam button. This shoot water button I very rarely use, but the steam button I use a lot. And other than that, a good mid-priced stainless steel bottom iron is all you really need to do. You can get them at Walmart, you can get them at fabric stores and pay more, or you can get them on Amazon, but just a good average iron. The second is to use distilled water in your iron to keep buildup and things from getting in your iron. And if you don't want to pay for distilled water, if you boil a big pan of water for about 5 minutes, then you've distilled it yourself and you can use that. But don't ever put just regular tap water in your iron or you'll end up with problems. As you wash fabrics or as you prepare fabrics to sew with, we're going to talk about that in the next session, but some fabrics will need to be washed, mostly your cottons and light cotton blends. And when you wash them, then you often have to iron them flat to get them done, to get them laid out. And then there's a couple of tools we're going to talk about. And there are a lot more tools than this available for tailoring and fancy things, but these are what I really consider the important ones. The first is an ironing ham, and that is used for ironing curves and keeping them from getting flattened, and I'll show you several examples of that. The second is an iron sleeve. Now, mine looks pretty rugged, and I'll bet if we unrolled that magazine, it would probably be from the 1970s. But you can make a canvas top, roll up some magazines, and put it in there, and this one's been around a long time. And then you'll need a measuring tool when we get to hemming, and I have my scissors just because there's going to be some trimming we need to do. And those are the basic tools you need to do good ironing. So let's talk with ironing clothes as you sew. Let's start there. And so this isn't really a top, but it's a piece of cotton that I've done some darts on, and darts are one of the first things that you'll want to do on your pressing ham, because as you do darts, you don't want to make a point at the top. If you're doing breast darts, then you iron them down from the top of the garment to the bottom, and then you can just do it from the back side with a fabric, and it makes that dart really clean out. If you're doing up and down darts, and again, we'll iron them from the back and then come back and look at them. But if you're doing up and down darts, you can either press them toward the center or toward the side as long as you are consistent with what you do. It doesn't, sometimes it feels better one way on another, but you want them, if you do one to the left, do the other one to the right, so they go to the side seams or the center. And again, if you put the tip of that around the edge of the ham as you iron it, then it will smooth it out, and when you go to look at those darts on the front, you won't have puckers. This particular one is a dress that had both seams in the middle and seams. So once I get both of the darts pressed, I roll that around the ironing ham and make a nice breast pocket for the shirt. So darts, your seams all need to be pressed, and I always go with the rule, either press them toward the center or away from the center, but just be consistent with what you do. If your seams are finished, these weren't finished seams, but any of your finished seams, need to go to the right or left. If you have open seams and you didn't have to have a finishing stitch on them, open seams can be pressed open, like with one piece of fabric going each way rather than like the darts were, and that's fine too. But if you serge them or you finish them, then you're going to need to go to the rules that I just showed you. So press every seam after you sew it without fail. That's just a very important rule to stick by. So this is a very small, actually I just started making masks, but this is a very tight curve. And a couple of things that you want to know when you've got interfacing in any size seam, you want to trim that interfacing out before you press it, so that interfacing, so I've got one here that hasn't been trimmed, and you just pick that interfacing up away from the fabric and trim as close to the seam as you can so that interfacing is not causing bulk in your seam. And that's going to be true when you get to doing interfaced collars or cuffs or any of that. You don't want a lot of interfacing staying in your seam. So these are the front of a mask, and once you've cut the interfacing out, because of the curve of this, you want to clip the seam right up to where the stitching is without cutting the stitching. And if you're cutting on an outside curve, you can just clip it like this. If you're cutting on an inside curve, if you fold it and kind of clip a little notch out of it, then it will lay better and have room. So this seam has all been cut, and we're going to stretch it over the end of the ham so that you can, and actually I'll do them from the inside first so that you can press this seam open. Now it's a little bitty tiny seam, so it's hard to get open, and you just have to, larger seams obviously are a little easier, but you just got to hold it in on that ham and get those seams to open up as much as you can, and press them. And like I said, this is a little 1/4 inch seam. This is the hardest seam you'll do, because most of your 5/8 inch seams won't be this tight. But then when you've done it all around, I usually stretch it on this hem the other way and press that seam flat against the hem, which flat means curved, but then you've got a good sharp look to that seam. That same technique will be used anytime you've sewn sleeves in, or you've got a big curve in a sleeve, or other part of the other thing that you need to press. So again, that's pressed open, trim that interfacing out, and then press from both sides. Top sleeve seams should be pressed toward the sleeve if it's not a sheer sleeve. So press them away from the garment out toward the sleeve. And when making pants, I think it's important that you sew the center seam first, and then when you do that and press it, you can press it on the hem around the curve of the crotch, and then when you come back and do the second seam, you can use the roll to go up inside the pants and press open up that outside seam. So most pair of pants will be done that way. The only time that you won't do that, or if the pattern says to do it the other way, the only reason I would follow that is if you really needed to finish an outside seam that you had to sew, like a French fold seam or something like that, would be the only time I would do the outside seam of pants first. You can do all the pockets, you can do the zippers, you can do all that stuff, but when you get to doing the legs, I say inner first so you can use the hem, and then outer so you can use sleeve roll. So now we're going to move to talking about pressing hems, and this is interfacing fabric, and I'm going to use it to show drapery hems, but quite frankly, almost all hems are done the same way, whether it's men's pants or, so you don't want, I've pulled my dairy-free fabric, and so it's rolling up a little bit. You don't want it rolling up when you start, so press that out flat, and then if you're doing pant hems, they might be 1 inch or 2 inches depending on what was on the pant originally. If you're doing, this is lining, if you're doing valances, the lining will have a 1 inch hem, and the outside piece might have a 2 or 3 inch hem. Same proposition's going to happen. If you're doing full drapes, you might do a 3 or 4 inch hem in the drape and a 2 inch hem in the line. And we'll go over all of that when we do hemming and drapes and balances later. But then turn that up, and I can pretty much judge an inch, but I still measure it because it's just more hassle to do it wrong than to have to go back and do it again. So you fold the first size over, and in hemming drapes or valances, you always want a double hem. When you're hemming pants, you'll only want a single hem, so you might just turn a 1/4 of an inch, but then you turn up the second hem, and now with that folded fabric, it's a little easier to keep it along that. So press your hem before you sew it, and then I'm going to assume that you know how to do a blind hem on a machine, and we're not going to do that today. That's what I've done here, is you fold the hem under one more time and you stitch along the outside fold and let it catch. After you've done a blind hem on a lining or drapery fabric, you'll see when you pull it apart and open it, it's got you know, it shows a little bit of stitching, and you know, if you've got colored drapes, that's going to go away. But you can pull it apart and then go back and press that open, and then you've got a nice clean hem. And like I said, that works on draperies, valances, linings, big fabric. And when you get to doing men's pants, it'll be the same thing. And it doesn't matter, even if your men's pants, you want to serge on the bottom, you can sew that hidden seam along the serging and just catch a little bit of the front and then open it up and press it out, and you'll be amazed about how many of those stitches just kind of fade into the background as you get them pressed out well. So there's a finished hem. And you know, when, like I said, when you do drapery fabric, you might want to fold it up 2 to 3 inches, and do that on both folds, whether it's a valance or a, you know, if it's a valance, a 2-inch hem is usually fine. But then fold it up double again, and then you'll hem it the same way. And when you've got it hemmed, come back, open it up, and press it again. I didn't hem this one because I've just done it on the lining, but hopefully you've got the idea by now. The last kind of hem that I want to talk about is a roll hem on prom dresses and wedding dresses, and those kinds of things. And I've done just a very small roll hem, but the hard part about roll hems is that as you go along those big flowy dresses, some of the curves end up on the bias and in very hard places to sew, and they don't always want to lay down just right. So if you will sew those in place, and you don't have to iron those before you sew them, I just sew them as I go, but then you come back from the inside and press those down flat, and you can see that if it's fabric that can stand the steam, that steam will take it out and get it to lay flat. If it's a lighter weight fabric that doesn't use steam or can't handle the steam, then you just have to be a little careful as you go along doing that. But if you do it all the way around and then turn it back in, back outside, you'll see how much cleaner and more well laid out that hem is. And I do a lot of prom and wedding dresses, so I use that technique a lot. So that's kind of the basics of ironing. As we go through draperies and some of the other things we're going to do, we might do more detail in those. So we've covered a lot of ground in this video, but the important thing to remember is that a pressed, finished seam looks so more professional than anything else you can do in sewing. So use your iron abundantly.